Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I've extended the title of my presentation. It's Digital ID, but as you can see on the heading there, leveraging on digital ID as a digital public infrastructure for economic growth. So with the focus on digital ID in this presentation, I would also like to backtrack a little bit and provide a bit of background to what the Department of ICT has been doing, and then converge now to what we're doing in terms of deploying, adopting, and scaling up digital ID. So I have 15 minutes, 13 now. The outline of my presentation will cover just, as I mentioned, the background, where we've come in the Department of ICT, some of the work we've done in the policy interventions, some of the work we've done to reform, and then get to implementation. Back in 2020, or before I should start, for those that have attended the Innovation Conference earlier, or the Digital Transformation Summit that we hosted back in Mosby, some of these slides will be familiar to you, and I've added to contextualize what I'm presenting here. So back in 2019 and 2020, when the Marape government came in to power, one of the objectives that was put forward to the Ministry for ICT was to try to see how we could harness ICT. And so I was brought in, and along with my minister, then and current minister, Honorable Timothy Masiu, and we set out on an objective to try to see how we can leverage on ICT for social and economic growth. Now, the picture wasn't clear at that time, and there was ongoing scattered interventions. For example, the Coral Sea cable, investments with the wholesale undersea cable, investments with telecom, with the broadband network, and a wide range of other investments were already ongoing. But there was no real clear vision and directive from a policy standpoint. So we had to quickly go back to the policy board and work on a clear policy. That's now the Digital Transformation Policy of 2020, endorsed by Cabinet. And what you see there is the vision statement. Digital transformation that makes government more effective, improves service delivery, and fosters inclusive and social economic development because of a smart, networked, and well-informed society. So we picked out 4 main objectives that we wanted to look at. Number one, there was a lot of talk going on. How do we improve the bureaucracy? How do we make things easy, not just for business, but for citizens and for government? So improve operational efficiencies. The second one was, how do we improve and how do we get more revenue into the basket to redistribute and grow services across different sectors? And 3, how do we foster innovation? And the fourth one was ultimately the experience of citizens we need to transform. So we turned those questions into objectives, and we linked them up into the policy. And so that was 2019, 2020. The next thing we had to do was try to understand, okay, those objectives, what do we need to do to get there? We had to unpack. And so, as AWS would always say, work backwards. We had to look at the targets in 2027, and then we had to see, okay, this is the goal, what do we need to do sequentially to get there? So we started to sort of put together this roadmap of things that we need to do. And we went back to the policy board and said, we need to draft up more policies. Now, if you have time, maybe you can go and check out the Digital Transformation Policy. It's at ict.gov.pg. And you can see that there are 6 pillars that we highlighted. 1 was digital infrastructure. 2, digital government. 3, cybersecurity and e-safety. 4, digital skills. 5, innovation and entrepreneurism. and 6, financial inclusion. So if you look at this policy map here, what that shows you is the policies that we had to develop, the enabling strategies to those policies, and then the action plan. And then we had to put a legal framework around it. So we had to do a lot of groundwork before we could get to a point where we could say, okay, let's harness on technology. So you can see the white spaces in here are the areas that we did not or have not done yet. We looked at what was most important, for example, cybersecurity and digital government, and then we went to an action plan, which is the digital government plan. We then aligned this policy to the macro policy environment. As we're all aware, there's a medium-term development plan already in play, and there are three areas which we've aligned to. That's the Connect PNG, national security, and digital government. So we've managed to align 3 of our digital transformation pillars in the MTDP. We then looked quickly at a governance framework to which we can implement, hold accountabilities, and there were three main areas that we needed to consider. One was an accountability point at each agency. So we called them the digital transformation officers. You might have CIOs or you might have DTOs, but in this case we assigned that name. And then an oversight committee, which is the Public Service ICT Steering Committee, which reported to a ministerial. So those three main pointers were important: accountability point, oversight committee, and a link to a ministerial committee. Now, after looking at the governance framework, we had to establish quickly a legal framework. So this was passed, the Digital Government Act, in 2022, and it provided a legal framework for digital services, data governance and protection, adoption of digital infrastructure, and cybersecurity. Now, keep in mind that this act is strictly for public bodies only, not for the industry. And then we had to look at structural change. So from policy, we went to structural reforms. So within the last 3 to 4 years, we worked on reforming the department. I should point out that when I joined the department, it was made up of public relation officers. So we had to transform a PR office into a department that is focused around ICT. So we had to establish coordination functions. We established a government cloud division, a cybersecurity division, and a development ops, DevOps division. And then we had to map out who would implement what. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go because I need to get to the main point here. So after policy to structural reforms, we had to then quickly look at the technology now. How are we going to leverage on technology? And so we came up with what we call the GovPNG tech stack. This was put together in 2022, and we fine-tuned it in 2023, and we've been slowly implementing components of it. But what is the principles around that? We said that technology and investment around technology, one, needs to first provide a better experience for government, business, and citizens. 2, we need a whole-of-government approach. Now, keep in mind that each agency prior to that and even to now have been investing in different technologies to a point where there's duplication in investments. Now, in 2022, we looked at the budget and we saw around 242 million was allocated to ICT investments. We identified that about 40, 50, and even there was some alternate calculation that 60% of that funding was duplication in investment. So it was important that we get a clear approach in how we adopt technology. The next one was that when we adopt technology, it must be smart, fast deployment, meaning that it doesn't take time for us to deploy. We need to get it over and done with. And then we need to think about the region as well. So if you look at this diagram here, you'll see that we started to organize how we want to adopt technology for government. First layer is cybersecurity and governance. Second layer is the hosting platforms. We need a whole-of-government approach to host our information, our data, and so forth. our systems. And then we need, number 3, a standardized communication platform, and that's made up of a couple of components. Number 4, what we call digitalization building blocks. So I'm going to touch on that. That's the main point of this presentation. And then we need to digitalize the services at the front end, meaning that what the citizens experience, what businesses experience, we need to digitalize that. But we cannot digitalize unless we have these layers deployed in a structured whole-of-government manner. So I'm going to pause here and just highlight some of the work that we've done since the policy reforms, to the structural reforms, to the adoption of technology, and now to where we are. So in terms of cybersecurity, we've established a National Cybersecurity Center within the department, and it has a SOC there, and we are monitoring over 75 government networks, infrastructure, and systems, and we have shared email services. We are going to about 5,000 emails now, and we've gazetted a series of digital standards now for public bodies to comply with. And our cybersecurity ranking globally, with all those efforts, has gone up from a tier 5 to a tier 3, which is really good. That's in the last 4 years. And in terms of hosting platforms, we are now hosting a whole range of government agencies now. And for digitalization building blocks, which is what I'm going to touch on now, we are deploying a digital ID and a digital wallet. Now, for those that came for our Digital Transformation Summit, we did a pilot launch for 3 services. One is the service portal. Service portal is it's on the stack. It's a single window portal for citizen access to services. And we are piloting now about 6 or 7 services which we've digitalized. This is a citizen's e-government portal. Now, linked to that portal, we've also pilot launched a service pass. A service pass is a digital ID. And then we have a service wallet app. It's not available on the App Store yet until we've completed the pilot process, and we'll put it up. The digital ID sits in the wallet, and any certificates which you obtain from the portal will be put into the wallet and made accessible for private sector to access for verification and so forth. And so these are the 3 services we've done. I am supposed to say that we are partnering with ITU and the GovStack. So that's the bottom box there. And they've supported us a lot with the technical approach. Now, I'm going to go to digital ID now as a use case. What is the Service Pass doing to improve the uptake in business and consequently the growth in the economy? Now, we look at the traditional way of opening a bank account. The current traditional way is you have to go and visit a local bank, and you have to wait in the line. Once you're at the front of the line and you want to apply for a bank account, now, I don't need to explain this to a lot of you, but just for the purpose of comparison, I am. Then you have to produce 2 or 3 forms of physical ID, and then you fill out the forms and attach those, and then they process it. You pay an account fee, give them the cash, and so forth, and account is open, and then you can use your card to access or FPOS and so forth. Now, with the Service Pass, what happens now is you download the service wallet, which is an app, and you self-enroll your digital ID. So it's going to take a liveliness test on your face, and then it may require you to scan any number from 1 to 3 forms of physical ID, and then there are checks done, and then it issues you a digital ID. Now, this digital ID goes onto your service wallet app, and then in theory, sorry, I'm not trying to promote any specific bank here with that diagram here, but it's for illustration purposes. Sorry if the other banks are here, but we promote all the banks. So then you can download the bank app, and then you can do everything you need to do, because the service wallet app will talk to the bank app So at the end of the day, minimize on face-to-face, minimize on lines, and you can transact. Now, there's a whole ecosystem we're talking about here. The service pass, there's a lot of use cases around it. For onboarding customer, now once you access an app, for example, in the example that I used of my bank, then it will authenticate you using your digital ID. And for government, in the example of the IFMS or the payroll system, we will now deploy a single sign-on, so it will verify using the digital ID that a public service will have. So we are streamlining a lot of the work. This is what we call digital public infrastructure. We deploy an infrastructure just like you build a road, and everyone uses it. Private and public sector uses it. That's a DPI. And then there's a whole range of other use cases there. Consent management, digital signature, which means that now you can apply for a loan without having to go in person and doing all the checks there. The entire process from applying, it may be applying for a loan, opening an account, or access to other financial services can be done end-to-end through an app. Now, who are the users? Users are both public and private sector. Banks, savings and loans, telcos, public bodies, and retailers, and so forth. Now, I don't need to talk about the numbers here. The numbers here are quite large. I mean, if some of you all are within those categories, savings and loans and banks and so forth, the numbers are huge. We were just talking in the break with the Vodafone team. Vodafone alone has over 1.2 subscribers already, and Digicel alongside that, and telcos alone is just over 4 million subscribers, active subscribers. Now, this is the interesting one. I'm sorry, I'm out of time, but I'll try my best to conclude. The question is, what about those that don't have a form of ID in the rural areas? How do we onboard them onto this app? Now, we are backing this up with our policy, digital ID policy. It's just gone out for consultation last week, Friday. You can check it on the website, and it's proposing a 4-tiered ID framework, meaning that if someone doesn't have a form of ID, they can be issued an ID anyway at Tier 1. And once they're able to get other forms of physical ID, they can scan it into their app, and then they can move up to Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4. Now, what does this do? This enables banks, as an example, telco companies, to onboard as much as they can while managing the risk associated with Tier 1 and Tier 2, but this helps us to push the barriers to get the uptake for financial services and also telco services, just to name those two sectors alone. So this tier framework is an example of how we want to open up the boundaries and get more onboarded and participate in the economy. Now, the Service Pass, Service Portal, and Service Wallet, then from a department perspective, we are not entity that's well suited to manage a service that needs to have an uptime 99.99999 time. You get the picture here. So we had to go and work with KCH, and I think we have KCH directors in here, and we've partnered to establish a subsidiary, and we're going through a due diligence process to make sure that there's a clear business case around, sustainability case and business case around it. And that's Kumul Technology Development Corporation. Now, what are our immediate targets? As soon as we get through this due diligence with KCH, we hope to quickly scale up. We want to tighten up the services on the portal and open it up to the public. We want to scale up the Service Pass to 10,000 immediately. And then we want to, from phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, once we get past that phase of 10,000, then we want to move towards a 1 million mark. So it's quite ambitious, but we think that the onboarding process will be quite easy through partnerships with the supers, the telcos, and the banks. What do I mean by that? I mean that we partner to onboard the issuance registration of digital ID through the private sector. So it becomes a public-private partnership to onboard digital ID. Now, I could go into so much detail about that, but you'll have to accept my short explanation for now. Okay, my last slide here is the economic targets. We think that by opening up the boundaries or the limitations of digital ID onboarding, we believe that there will be a big impact in the telco sector and the financial sector. Now, the financial inclusion, if we're able to address financial inclusion, there's potentially, it could be 3 to 4.5 million unbanked as per our financial inclusion strategy. If we're able to reach at least half of that, I believe that there could be a trigger-on effects on the economy. And all the calculations, all the projections are done in the strategy. We can potentially get a digital ID adoption of 6 million, and we've done the numbers on that. And with digital ID now, we can now address biometric voting because that's a prerequisite for biometric voting. So that's on that side of it. Now, economic targets, we need to talk a little bit more with the finance department, but we believe that can get a 30 to 50% uptake on non-tax revenue. And we believe that there'll be increase in some of the GST, as well as the company itself has great potential. So we're hoping that once we get through the due diligence with KCH, we can work on the investment round with Kumultech. Okay, thank you very much. I will just say that digital ID is a clear enabler for improving business. And if we do it right and scale it up right, it needs to be a partnership with public and private sectors. And then if we can scale it up right, it can help trigger the growth of the economy. Thank you very much.